Todd Fry, do you know Ted Mercer?
No, I don't know his name.
Todd's with our engineering firm, KCI.
Oh, great.
So he's helped us with the permitting process for, I think, what we've done with Marina Park as it is today. Have you been involved?
Yeah, I'm actually with Duffield now, but when
What the heck was I?
I've actually been involved in both sides.
I apologize, Todd.
Not a problem. When we first started on it, I was with KCI. We did the original permitting for the dredging of just the slips of the ramps. Since then, we've helped out with the E&S permitting for the actual work.
What's Duffield doing here? Just here to listen to that?
I heard that Marina Park was on the list. I wanted to hear about it.
Oh, there you go.
That's
Oh,
right.
very good. You threw me off there for a minute.
I forgot.
Well, listen, we're going to start the meeting, our workshop meeting of September 13th, and we invited Ted Mercer with Kingfisher to come in, and I really appreciate Ted coming in. In my opinion, Ted is an expert when it comes to understanding the permitting process, the dredging process. I don't know how many marinas or piers that you put in, probably countless.
Yeah,
And
the continuous.
And I know that there's some questions that I had that maybe you could help me on. But one of the visions that I think we as I'm going to speak for the board here a little bit, is we want to try to figure out how we can use the Big Elk Creek into the Elk River as an asset for the town of Elkton. You mentioned it a few minutes ago when we were having a little small talk, that we've always been worried about flood control. How can we move the water in and out? More of a flood control project, but you know, where we used to get the 2-year nuisance flood 4 times a year, well, we're really not getting it as often as we did in the past, but we still get our nuisance floods. But what if we could make this a beautiful river trail in some manner? Maybe you can enlighten us. Can it be done? What can you do to help us? Can that water be dredged? That's part of it. But the other part that we started work on was Marina Park. We started doing some cleaning out of the old area where the boat slips were. And mentally, I always thought there was like 2 or 3 boat slips is all that was in there, but I think it was a total of how many boat slips, Lou? You know?
Probably
17, 18?
yeah, somewhere in that neck of the woods.
Yeah, there's like 17 or 18 boat slips, which it was dumbfounded. Quite frankly, I didn't know until we started moving some items around that we saw all these slips in there. And I would love to be able to use these things again. And so I guess, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
who you are and your connections to Elkton and how long you've lived here? And
Well, sure, I'd love to. Thank you very much for having me, and it's nice to see everybody. I guess what I'd like to say is that initially, you know, even back 20 years ago, I was always interested in the condition of the town, especially with the flooding and things that would come about. It's actually a very dynamic river, in that you have the area which is almost right at 213, where you have your tidal water and your overland stream flow, and they kind of meet within that area. So you're always working and kind of working against themselves. So the tide works coming in, and on a flood, the water's trying to get out. So if you have those two that coincide, a high tide with a large rain, you wind up with the flood. And until that tide can go out, it can't pull the flood water away. So it doesn't matter how good a job you do, if the tide is high and the other water is backing it up, very tough to get rid of flooding in that situation. So those major nor'easters, when the tide comes into the town, those are things that you're going to be saddled with. But in the upland, in the management on the other end, with these wooded wet areas, the ball fields, parks, those type of things, you can alleviate a lot of your smaller, like you would call nuisance flooding, something that covers the soccer fields, and getting that water out of there, more quickly so that it doesn't turn the grass, into grease, and just make a mess of things, so that it comes and it goes and it's managed. That's the one thing that's always been an interest of mine. But just recently, when we discussed the boat ramp, and that's something that we do all the time. We have constructed boat ramps. We're currently in the process of constructing a large-scale one for the town of Chestertown. And I was going to compare the two in that Chestertown has much less waterfront than the town of Elkton, much less. However, it's all managed right down to the inch. And I think that the management...
I never thought that.
Yeah, it's the management. It's the management of what you decide to do and how you move forward with things, and kind of a long-range plan and working towards it. Now, when we're talking about the dredging, this little area between the two bridges, if you will, that's probably the best, the most well-used, or people are most familiar with that area. If that area were just dipped out, as we call it, just a small channel deepening, what that's going to do is just going to give you a very localized body of water that when the tide goes out, there'll still be enough to float a small craft. But it's not going to get you to Elkton or out of Elkton from anywhere else. You're still locked in by the sediment deposits that are on the south side of Route 40 and down through until you get out with the connection with that's the big Elkton, little Elkton. Until you hit that connection, really you just don't have the water, and there's a lot of trees that have since eroded and leaned over that would require some pruning to be able to get actual boats up to that point. It can be done, but the dredging is costly, and some of the areas that you're going through are considered environmentally sensitive, so that does add another component. However, on the other hand, when you're looking at utilizing it, kayaks are much more popular now than they were 10 years ago. You see them, and these kayak launches are becoming popular in small towns. I believe Federalsburg, Maryland has a really nice kind of a river trail and a kayak system that they use down there, launch system. It seems to be very popular. At this time, there is money available through grants, through different programs to develop a town's waterfront. There are money definitely available there, and then there's the permitting, and the permitting that goes along with that is it can be a little tough because you're right in the middle of a sensitive area. You're attempting to bring more people to that area, and so you have safety. You have all of your handicap accesses. If you're using any federal dollars or grant dollars, then you come under certain scrutiny as far as inspection, things like that can drive costs higher. For the greater good, however, it still requires you a project that the town may have been able to come up with $25,000 for is now $100,000 once you start getting involved with federal grants and their own requirements. And some of them are construction-wise, some of them are NAVA, some of them are environmental restrictions, things that you're just not allowed to do. So that being said, there's kind of two ways to approach projects of working along the water. One is to stay very, very small. Very small, stay underneath of stay within the criteria that keeps you out of the large scale permitting. do your work in-house. Smaller projects, like the ramp where you did that, with dredging and cleaning that out. The only problem with that is that you do that work, and I think it has value, but it doesn't get you any further than right there. And if you kind of a ramp without a secure parking lot is really, attracting somebody to get their car, broken into at times. If you're not providing the upland, a ramp without a public bathroom, trash service, those types of things. So when you have a ramp, it's great, but you can't always trust that everybody's going to use it and take all their trash with them and clean up. So you have to police those areas. Also, you're with the bulkhead that you currently have there is it's right on the verge of not being re-permittable. In other words, it's close to being less than 85% intact. And one of the regulations through MDE is that they don't let you put back something, a bulkhead, a vertical wall structure, unless it is 85% intact. So in order to do that, you have to apply. They would evaluate. I'm saying that you're close there now. And then you could reinstall another one directly in front of it and go down. The other would have to be completely removed, pulled back, bank possibly graded, and and you may have to use stone there. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes when you want to have boat access right up to the edge, the stone is not the best answer. It is better for erosion. It does slow down. It does slow down the erosive process. It also slows down reflective wave activity. So it's not bouncing off one side, going to the, and you create this slosh effect in a narrow body of water. So it is beneficial that way. I guess what I would say is, I was very interested in coming here today because I wanted to hear, from the board, certainly, what kind of goals that the town has, or that they would personally like to see within, these areas, these usable areas. And keep in mind that just because it's a river doesn't mean that all the activity on it has to be boating. Creating trails, creating access points, creating long loops where people could actually ride a bike, or you make a boardwalk that would be just far enough above the wetland surface that it could be utilized. You could go from here, you could go all the way over to Meadow Park. You could create quite a trail system through there, and in turn manage some of the activities that are going on, and just get more of the public involved with what's going on with that river, with that system. So that was kind of what I was looking at in a nutshell.
Well, I can speak for myself on this, and I think that the kayaks, in my opinion, is the way to go, the light craft. I think that we're never going to be able to get motorized craft past the Baker Bridge or the 213 Bridge. It's just not going to happen. So,
right, it won't, that's it.
So our stop point has to be Marina Park. That doesn't mean that maybe we can't dredge down a little lower to where you could possibly dock in close to American Home and Hardware, for example, and be able to get out there and walk into our downtown. At least it could be an area where we could dock and enjoy, check out other things on the town. Going back the other way, I think going at least, I would love to be able to do some type of walking trails in some manner. It would be difficult to go, I guess, on the north side of the creek and be able to go all the way to Elk Landing. But that would be an interesting trail if there was a way that we could do that. So you could walk from downtown, walk that creek all the way to where the Little Elk and the Big Elk connect. On the opposite side, and I guess that would be the, am I thinking this right, the south side of the creek. Now we're in that area where we're behind rural farms. I think there's a lot of opportunities through there, but I'm not exactly sure what. And it could be, maybe our vision is these walking paths and some selected boardwalks through there as access points. I think that's...
Yes. And that being said, that going around underneath of the highway bridge, they've done something very similar in Cambridge, where they go under, around to the Sailwinds, and we just our company just rebuilt the Sailwinds walkway system all around their building just last winter, and I had a chance to look over that project as well. And going underneath these bridges, it's an easy way to get around. But you go just over the water, go around, and then you create your access. Those are the things that people like to do. But not everybody has a boat. But that being said, you still, if you're going to have a ramp, and if you find that there would be monies available for dredging to get you to that ramp from downriver, then people may put their boat over there and go out into the Elkton just to take an evening cruise, if you will. Right now, only on the highest tide and with a boat that you don't really care too much about, you wouldn't go down through there because it's just going to get raked with the different branches and leaves, and there's logs, and it would require some cleanup to do that, but certainly not impossible.
How's the rest of the board feel? What do you see there? Anyone very similar?
I see, it's funny, someone in college years ago had to do something for downtown, and his was exactly what you're saying with the boardwalk and connecting from there to downtown over to Elk Landing, and the walkway I think would be wonderful. And kayaks are big. I know they did that in Cambridge, right there by the visitor center, and it's a great business for the person that's renting the kayaks, and it's great for the town.
Yeah, they have one that just started in the town of Northeast as well. I think last year was their first year behind the church, behind the St. Marian's. They have a kayak business there as well. The other thing that I was going to look at was, and say that it would probably be advantageous, would be looking at the drainage that's coming off the highway, and looking at a lot of that that's coming off of 40, draining down and coming in just on the south side of the ramp, has created a lot of erosion. Probably is, without a doubt, it's going to be a source of sediment in that creek. And so that I think that partnering with State Highway and different entities, government entities, to maybe just do a little better job managing those specific things could benefit your park and your area, and in doing so, if you can if their drainage works better, your park works better. And if a part of creating that drainage and managing that drainage gives you a trail by which to maintain, then you also are able to utilize that trail in your park. So you're doing a lot of overlapping and making certain things work for you. And I think that coordination is how these projects, when they're done much larger, that's how they get done. Is that you have to have a focus. You have to have a large plan, but it doesn't have to be precise until you find out who can do what. And then you put those parts together, and you wind up with a really nice park, a really nice area where just by doing the maintenance and working with the different groups, you've established an area, and then the town further develops it, so that these different grants for for, deepening the water, different maintenance for working on your drainage areas, all these different things, where you're working around the other parks, where there may be the need for, I just, having had my kids at Cecil Soccer when they were younger and utilizing Meadow Park and missing a lot of soccer games or getting just completely muddy because of it, we noticed that certain things like some better drainage with some small bridges and moving some things around, we could have pulled water off of those sites a little quicker to maintain, to be able to use them. So we're talking about something that's going to work on a much larger scale than just put a walkway in. Although just a walkway is a good start, but if you're going to incorporate that and put it all together, it can be a much larger and much more beneficial project to the town.
How do you suggest that we move forward with something like this?
Well, that's a good question. I would say that, first of all, somebody within the town has to take a tremendous amount of interest in it, be they elected or a hired employee. You have to have a person that's more or less on a clearinghouse or a grant writer, someone that is very strong grant writing ability and takes a lot of interest in the town's business with that, because it's a different type of grant for this type of work. Mm-hmm. And there are certain people that are very good at writing them and putting them together and the focus that they're working on. I know that the town of Chestertown has been very heavily involved with getting almost all of their work has been paid for by.
That was my next question. What is the amount of money that the grants are giving?
Well, that's funny. There's a certain amount of money for drawing, design, or engineering. A certain amount of money. Let's just say that's $50,000. I don't know. There's a certain amount of money that, when you look at it, you look at exactly what you want to do, that they'll do a cost share. They'll do a 50%, 75% cost share, depending on the activity. Certain things like walkways are probably the least expensive because it doesn't require a lot of earth moving activity, it doesn't require a lot of disturbance, and so you don't get caught up in a lot of the E&S and stormwater work that you can get caught up with when you're doing larger marine construction, dredging, hauling, having to get rid of the material that you pull out. And that's why I say what NDE has a program that they like to use as they call it beneficial reuse of dredge material. So if you can come up with a project where you're dredging on one end and you're beneficially reusing that material, let's say, on your soccer fields, raising areas, grading with that material, once it's dry, you find that it works. They will do cost shares on those, so you don't just end up with a pile of spoil when you're done. You don't just end up with a landfill fee, but you end up with something else, another beneficial project on the other end after your work is done. So those are the kind of things that you really have to look into, and in your mind you have to say, I'm designing this project to do what? And then you have to look at all of, the things that surround that, to how you make it and how you get it done, and then sometimes reaching out and looking at different entities as to how it's going to get paid for, and that's just I think that it's gone for quite some time, and now that you're seeing the kind of the dilapidation of that existing wall. At some point, you're going to have to decide if you're going to replace that wall, let that wall fall in the river, which I wouldn't do, or take that wall out, cut that bank back, and put some type of erosion control on it. That wall's reached the end of its life. So in doing so, now would be the time to kind of move forward and look at your funding sources, see what you could get, and go from there. But it is going to take an individual that's close to the town, or a grant writer, someone that can make that happen, and then someone like myself, or depending on how you're structured with your engineering groups, to look at it that way. And so there's a lot of opportunity, and it can be this much, it can be this much, or it can be as large as you want it. You really have a lot to work with, and I think the multifaceted approach is the way to go, because you get so much more out of it in the long run. Although it is more expensive at first, in the long run you're so much further ahead, and you're not creating little pockets of things that that are not connected. You definitely want to connect as much as you can, so that the person that goes all the way to Meadow Park and gets on a bicycle can go all the way down, on the other side of Route 40 and maybe only have plus one road.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's just it. That's what I would like to put in front of you.
And you mentioned, and I'm going to kind of go all script here a little bit, but if you were brought into the mix, is this something that you can handle?
Oh yeah, sure.
You can handle design work,
Yes.
permitting processes,
Yes.
and estimates on completion.
Yes. Everything all the way through. I think that you would see that anything that required engineering, I would have and would get an engineer stamp on it. But for the most part, this work is going to be considered environmental work, and probably less engineering until it gets to the final design phase, in which if you're getting grant money, you will have to have an engineered design element.
Is there certain times of the year that you would have to do work, or can it be done at all times?
Just about every permit that we receive now from MDE or the Army Corps of Engineers have restricted times, especially for dredging. They're, because of the anadromous fish, or the fish that migrate up in the spawn, and the presence of hot water, or warm water, SAVs, things like that, they are restricted time of year. And that can be, it's usually in the spring, which you would say like February 15th until June sometime.
And I know that the scope of the work, time for the scope of the work depends on how much work we do.
That's right.
By any means, but if we were really focusing in on from one bridge to the other, and making that area a very nice area for rafting, for kayaking, is it a 2-year project, a year project?
Well, I would say you're going to have a year into the permit, the design permit. I'm being a little loose with that, and if there's, if there are things that come up, changes, special requests by the regulatory agencies, could go a little longer. The permitting for that, if you're talking about redoing the bulkhead, reconstructing the trail, maybe getting to the other side and doing some work along 40 down with the state highway drainage, and allowing that to be a part of your trail system, then that coordination may take a little longer. But keep in mind, a lot of that is not within the tidal areas that require certain permits. A lot of it doesn't require the same permit. So some of that stuff for drainage can be done under what, for lack of a better word, they call coordination wides, which are permits that the Corps issues, routinely for routine maintenance of, you could say flood control or drainage or erosion control. So those are things that don't take as long, but the full-blown dredging permit's gonna take you about a year. And that is considered a wetlands license that comes from the governor's office.
Very good. Is there
One
any?
quick
Yeah.
question. With that permit, will they check to see if it's 85% impact the, what do you call it?
The bulkhead
The
itself?
bulkhead, yeah.
Yeah, usually they do. They will check on it. And there's a lot of, depending, that area also, you know, because of what you want to use it for. But you're probably okay with it right now.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Ted, you started talking a little bit about Meadow Park. I know this is not the same problem, but I was just wondering, I've been on the board going 4 terms now. And, I've seen you before, but never knew you done this type of work. But have you ever had any input with the flooding and stuff going on Delaware Avenue? I know it's a state road, but...
You know, I hadn't provided any input there in the sense that it was, there was always something going on with an engineering firm or a group or something that was, you know, looking at it, or when they did the raising of that road, certain things like that that you have to look at. I just look at that area as, there's certain things that have been done there in the past that could be possibly done, you know, more beneficially. And keep in mind, we all know that, you know, a low area is going to get water in it. I mean, we can't, you just can't make this high wall ditch that's going to come down through the town of Elkton and no water's ever going to spill out of it. I mean, it's near impossible to expect that. The key is to get the water off as quickly as you can so that it doesn't do the damage and lay there and sit there. And you have to have those spillover areas to allow that water to go, or it just becomes a channelized torrent, if you will, and just rips the banks of your creeks out. And that's what you run into. But if you notice, I think, like the mayor said, that you're not seeing as much of that, the smaller ones now, because of the fact that I think that they're doing a little bit better. The agriculture community is doing better with maintaining their runoff. The building community is doing better with maintaining their runoff. So you're not getting those surges of water like we got before. Now that there are these sediment erosion control ponds, and they are having an effect, but they're only designed to handle a certain amount of water too. So when you get a real bad flood, you're still going to get wet. But I think that there's a possibility there for looking at how to manage Meadow Park so that it can still be utilized to get it dry so much quicker. So when it does get wet, it's nothing more than.
So if you were involved with the dredging of the river, would it be some kind of an option maybe to tie in where the drainage could?
Absolutely. I think that's where you talk about getting a double, getting a double out of something like that, where you can use both and making that work. And
maybe at the same time, you can replace that bridge that we're trying to.
Very good.
well, I tell you what, it's definitely a choke point for the water there. I mean, there's not much you can only put so much water through underneath that bridge.
And what about all that buildup that we have there right now?
Yeah, and it's going to continue to do, because what it does is it blasts through and scours under, and then when it gets through the bridge, it comes through, it then drops the sediment because of what it's carrying. It eddies out, and you wind up with that huge amount of sand material.
Is there any way to work on that problem?
It's, it's the size of the I guess the size of the underpass going up underneath of there. The water goes through, it just creates that funnel and just too much velocity.
Mr. Lemon, you had a comment or a question?
Maybe this gentleman could help us put together a pro forma budget based on good guesses, based on his experience, so you have some idea of where you're headed from the cost standpoint.
Thank you. Ted, did you write that note down?
I did.
There you go.
We could do that.
That'd be great.
We're all sitting here, and I think the related staff have a genuine interest in the project. But initially, you were saying basically that you would need somebody with an interest. Were you talking about having a point person, having an interest in order to do the grant writing and other initiatives that are needed to get things started?
Yes, I would. somebody that has the interest, that, you know, to take, you know, to step out and make phone calls when they're necessary, and to receive phone calls.
Right.
You know, I call that a clearinghouse person, the person that when the calls come in, they know where to direct them. They, you know, they're that point of contact, and somebody that can make, that's not afraid to say what they need, you know, what they need to talk about, or answer questions, or get answers quickly. Because for instance, for me, let's just say that I was the point on it. I'm the point for my company, I'm working for the town. But it's always better to have somebody that's directly involved with the government, whether they're on the board or close.
We would have Jean Minner.
Yeah, right.
Jean Minner is our town planner, and she writes our grants. We also be working with Mary involved in this. In fact, Jean Minner and I have had some discussions about Meadow Park collectively, because there's water policy.
Yeah.
Within the circle itself, there's areas that aren't being used because it's, but she was looking. Huh?
Using.
What's wrong with that? We were trying to figure out a way that maybe we could make more usable space. And
Right.
like you said,
Right.
get rid of that water faster.
Mhm.
And if we were able to do that, it'd be better for the whole community.
Right, and just consider, consider costs, you know, when you're talking about dredging and moving material and having to haul it and get rid of it. And if you have a way to utilize it, you're taking 25 to 30% of the dredging job cost and getting rid of it. You don't have to pay to get rid of this material. It doesn't become a stockpile somewhere that you never use. It's just in the way. And there's dollars out there for beneficial reuse.
Well, we've got a lot of piles of product, I think.
You couldn't put it in the floodplain.
You can't re-put it in the floodplain.
You wouldn't, it gets our, so it had to be used outside the floodplain.
Well, my question is there a norm that other people were putting it back in the floodplain?
Well,
I'm just gonna ask that.
Well, I would say this as beneficial reuse and creation of wetlands and the different areas, the way they use them. They are utilized that way, but they are not, for instance, you couldn't build a parking lot in the floodplain, things of that nature, but the program through MDE does allow for its use within the critical area. I don't know how your floodplain ordinance works.
The surface or whatever you said earlier.
Yeah, and essentially, a lot of these things are just grading. They're very, you're using, you know, where you're talking about, there's 6 inches of water, but it lays there for a month. You know,
Yes.
So that's a long time to have 6 inches of water on your ball field. So it's more or less a regrading, and not so much as a filling. But you're right, if you have an ordinance that says you can't fill there, then you have to find a way to work around that ordinance, you know, to be able to manage those ball fields. Maybe there's a put and take, maybe there's material that could be taken out for a net, so there's no net gain of fill within the zone.
Well, listen, it's food for thought, but
Yeah.
Ted,
Well, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you,
very much.
and I'm looking forward, maybe you can send me a note and let me know what you think the proposal could do.
Okay, I'll do that.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's nice
Thank
meeting
you.
you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Very good. Going in the
Oh,
middle,
okay.
I'm just curious.
The next on the discussion is the Downtown Surveillance Camera Project. Chief, you're going to give us an update on what you're doing? And what- right, Chief, you're on.
Okay, won't be too long. What I handed out is a picture of the downtown area, specifically Main Street, between Bow and North. The yellow lines that you see on, that are indicated there, those lines depict the proposed areas where we'll place four cameras. Of the 4 cameras, one will be what is called a PTZ, which simply means pan, tilt, zoom. And if you're not familiar with pan, tilt, zoom, that means you can actually move the camera from a remote location. You can move it sideways, up and down, for whatever may be needed. Just a little background here. Back sometime early in July, I was asked to look into downtown camera surveillance system. Initially, I looked at placing cameras from Bridge Street on Main Street, starting at Bridge, all the way along Main Street down south. It would have encompassed about 20 some odd cameras. But after a meeting more recently, we decided to kind of really create this as a pilot program where we do something much smaller, much less expensive, and just go with a 4-camera project and get any kinks worked out, see if it's benefiting, see if we're getting what we want out of it before we go and really do anything expansive. So what I'm proposing here today is simply say, let's go with that 4-camera system and see how it works out for us. Like I said, as you can see on the paper, we'll start off with cameras somewhere on Main Street between Bow and North, and we may place a camera somewhere either on North Street at Main or just east of North Street on Main. But the 4 will be down in that area. They need to be in close proximity to each other because of the way the system works. Each camera kind of sends a signal to the next, and then ultimately back to the hub, which will be placed in the Elkton Alliance building. Right now, we're looking at a cost somewhere in the area of $20,000 for cameras themselves, installation, and then there's also some monitoring costs. Now, keep in mind that the cameras won't be monitored locally. We will have online access, but there won't be round-the-clock monitoring of the camera system. Like I said, we're looking to kind of pilot this right now, see how it's going to work out for us. And then I'm going to say probably sometime after 90 days after installation, we can kind of take a look and see if we want to go further with it.
And
So, any questions?
yeah, Chief, just to add, our initial proposal was to do that whole extended area, and of course that's still the goal. But I like your thinking. It'd be, if we go out and move forward and put 26 cameras in, and we find out that the system doesn't work the way that we were thinking it should work, then it would be a huge failure for us.
Right.
And I think that my understanding of these cameras, it is line of sight.
Yes.
So that we could, once we get these 4 in, we can build from that nucleus and work ourselves out, and we could truly go throughout the whole town. I mean, that 26 cameras could lead into 52 cameras to 104 cameras to 208 cameras. But we have all the infrastructure paid for here in the initial, and then it's just adding on the cameras.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think it's good, too, initially, that it's going to be a trial project, because I know when I was at Elkton High School, we put cameras all over the building, and some were put in areas that they didn't need to be put. And, you always had to come back and redeem yourself in a lot of areas where cameras were.
Right.
And I think it's very important to have our little signage.
That's exactly what I was just.
It's going to have a little smiley face or whatever, and says Elkton's a camera-friendly place.
Camera friendly.
Camera-friendly, and we'll just put these little camera-friendlies wherever we have the area. Any questions from the board on this?
I think it's a great idea.
John?
Of course, this is video but not audio, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
No audio, just video.
And this will be backed up somewhere to the cloud or to?
Yeah, the main hub will be located in the Elkton Alliance building, where it will be a local DVR, but then the company that we're dealing with will allow for access up to 45 days past the recording date. So it'll always be available. And then law enforcement will have access to, yeah, if we need or want it.
And you will be able to take pictures off of that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Lou, you wanted to add onto the agenda a discussion about a property. Should we do this in a closed meeting, or are you okay talking about it?
Yeah, I think you need to talk about the Elkton Armory project, because
Yep.
I received an email from the Department of Planning wanting to would have funds to purchase this building.
I think most of the board is aware of what we're, yes,
Okay.
we're going to, yeah, it will, I guess what I didn't know, well, listen, it's too late now. Lou, go ahead and give the rundown on what the situation with the armory is. Because I don't think it's been out there yet, what the situation with the
Well,
armory is.
the Armory is, the building itself, the Victor McCool Readiness Center has been declared a surplus property by the Maryland Military Department. I think the board knows that. And once that
But I haven't
happens-
seen anything out in the public yet.
I'm sorry?
I hadn't seen anything out in the news yet. It hasn't been out?
Yeah,
Oh,
he
did
had
you? All right.
something.
I would think so. Once it's
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
I never miss Brad's articles. What's wrong with me?
Okay, once the Maryland Military Department declares that surplus, it goes to the Department of General Services. Then it goes into the clearinghouse process because it becomes surplus property, and it goes out for procurement initially by governments that are interested in it. In this case, the state government is going to let it be available either to the county or to the town. Obviously, with regard to the proximity to the town would be in our best interest. We could get it there. I don't think there was a clear consensus by the board to pursue the Armory initially, so I notified Al Wine and Eric Sandstrom that we had no interest in procuring the property. But since that time, we had to respond again to the clearinghouse, and we left that kind of question open. And when Gene responded the last time, we said that a possibility exists. Well, anyway, we received this email from the Maryland Department of Planning, wanting to know if we were interested in acquiring the property with respect to do we have funding to do it, if we were going to be granted that property. So I don't know if the board wants to pursue the Armory in lieu of the project over on Booth Street. I don't think you can, both projects are going to be very costly. Obviously, the Armory, since it's a structure and it's already in place, would be much less costly than building something from scratch, extending all the utilities, three-phase service, and all the other things involved in that. And also because it's a prominent building in the town, it's easy to access. Copious parking is available. There's a lot of reasons that support why we should pursue the Armory as a community center in lieu of building one from scratch. And I know it's up to the board what you want to do. But I think you need to make a decision because we have to know, staff need to know what we should do.
Did that have the price on it still?
No, the email we got today didn't have.
Yeah, they want an answer on this act closed business today.
What?
Yeah, September 13th, I saw it.
Some people are going to buy it. It just says, the question, do you currently have funds available for the acquisition of the property? If not, how much time would you need to obtain those funds? What would be the name of the grantee? Obviously, the town of Elkton would need advance. And those questions can be answered by close of business September 13th today. This one, we're not saying we're gonna buy it, but they wanna know if we could buy it. And the answer to those questions is yes, we would have funds to purchase the building. I think it's about $760,000. We have 500 allocated for the community center. And obviously, we could get the balance from the unassigned fund balance if we want to purchase the building.
Well,
Without borrowing any money.
I think of course, I don't want to speak for anyone, everyone else get to say their own piece on this. The town of Elkton, we want a community center. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We want a community center and / recreation center. And we have acquired a parcel of land over off of Booth Street that we are intending on moving forward with that community center. One of the little hiccups that we just recently got was that our community block grant was denied, and that was a little bit of a hiccup, I think, for us to see that that was a grant that I was kind of counting on. I think the board was counting on.
Sure was.
That was a huge start toward getting that project started and underway. I think the Armory, in my view, is a wonderful building, wonderful project. I think my personal feeling is it would meet the needs of our community and our recreation. Now, saying that, I also understand the feelings of some of the members of the board that over the years, the Armory hasn't been the friendliest to the town of Elkton to use that building for recreation and community activities, because they've always said to us comments like, well, you know, when you're on that floor, the floor's bouncing, you're knocking off tiles from the top floor down to the bottom floor. There was always reasons why they were giving, and I'm guessing this is what I heard.
They were giving us as an excuse not to use it?
That's correct. Is that correct? Am I saying they were?
And the floor was hitting the pipes.
The floor was hitting the pipes. There's always issues of why, and I can understand that mentally, the board would feel that that wouldn't be the right building to have any type of community or recreation activities in it. Now, I will tell you, I took that tour, and the guy that gave us the tour, he was the complete opposite. He was like, no, there's no problems in here. This is a solid floor. This is the Armory. You know, this building isn't going anywhere. So I don't know if it was the individuals that didn't want us to use that, so they didn't have to clean up the mess after we were gone, or
Let me add into that, because there was a couple of years, and Louis can remember this, we had a chance to use that facility, and I think the person that was running it just didn't want the activity to be taking place there.
Really?
I don't think so. Now, all the activities that all the servicemen have been having, there's been thousands, hundreds of men standing on that floor, and that floor hasn't caved in. But the point I'm making is, that would be a great building to have, and I'm saying this not to say I'm not going with the new facility because of funding. That would be a nice, you said about 700, what was 70?
That's 700,000.
Nice building to have to actually transition into a new building. I mean, I still want the new building, and I want both of them now. I'm just come straight out and say it, but because of this historical building here, that we should be really just like that jail that was across the street. There's several things that we should have really had our hands into, but we never really had that big push for the funding. I know that's a big key thing is if we can get that and get some kind of support money to help us develop it into a community center, and then move forward with the one over on Booth Street after. I'll probably get it going when it gets built, but anyway, yeah, I'm just letting you know because it's been a long while just getting this far and backwards again. But anyway, I would love to move into something where at least the kids have something to move in, not just kids, the adults. So if it means to delay the community center, because I hate to say that word, the new one. We still have the property, and maybe somewhere down the road we can move into it after funding becomes available. I don't, that's what I say on that.
I actually like your thoughts there because, you know, I came in on this knowing that the board wanted a rec center and I was all for it. And like Rob said, it's an unexpected hiccup on the money. But that's a big, that's huge. But I like your thought process, which I never thought of. Rather than do without a rec center, I mean, we certainly could, you know, do we want the rec center or do we want location? Which is more important? And I think having the rec center is more important than location at this point. But it doesn't mean that we can't pursue development down the road. So I like your thought process on that. But I do think almost like this is something that's opened up and it's almost meant to be. for us.
Well,
My thought on this, and I mentioned before, I'm not thinking it's like Robbie, but I think because it is available, and it's close to the town, it can be used as an auxiliary site of some sort. But it would take major planning on the part of Mary and others to find out what you can do with that building, because all you have is just one big space. And I certainly know, because I worked in big spaces like that all my life. I mean, to plan what you're going to do it's going to be very serious. And it's not too much you can do, I guess, for the community unless she plans it well. Because a big space like that is usually used for volleyball, or basketball, or dance, or floor hockey, or some type of recreational activity. And you know, I guess that would serve her as well, but what would be used for the community initially, I can't see it coming. But it's great.
Well, I think that my other concern was I haven't heard from Mary at all. Personally, I'm, you know.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I do have one more comment. The last time we talked about it, part of that building's going to be still used by service. Is that still, I mean, we obtained the building, still end up having to give up half of it?
300 square feet, that one office was
And
had
where
to
is
be
that behind our building?
for 10 years.
For what?
3 years.
Or please be somebody.
and my concern is, okay, we're saying we're interested in purchasing the armory, so $700 and some thousand, and we do not know what the cost is going to be to make that building where we can be in it, whether it does need the floor, or the pipes, or the electric redone, the heat. We know there's, no air or something, or there's something not working, or heat.
I think Lou sent out a,
New heater in it.
you sent out a
Real power
proposal.
heater that is new. That the issue, there's a plumbing issue, and there's no HVAC for the main thing. There's air conditioning in the offices, they have air.
So we don't have a cost analysis of, I think we should have the armory. I really think that should be a town building. I mean, the historical factor of it, and it's just part of Elkton. I can't see it. What's that?
I said, we're going to put it on there.
So, but as far as, you would,
I think that it's more realistic. I think that we would get in there sooner. I think that there's no way to upgrade that building that's going to cost as much as it would for a new building. And I think that we have other options that we can do with the land that we just got. Rather than us having to walk over down to Meadow Park, that would be a perfect little park for our summer camp kids to go to in the summer.
But
So-
do you think you can accomplish in that particular building, the space you have, the needs necessary for the programs that you run?
We would still need gyms for our basketball league, but we're dealing with that room up there. That building is a whole lot bigger,
Yeah,
and a
I
whole lot more
understand.
space.
Right.
So,
We have outgrown that upstairs.
so we're looking, I'm just hypothetically putting 1.5 million into that building to make it usable for us. When this building over here probably costs us probably 3 million maybe. I mean, I'm brand new.
We're going 4.5 million.
Well, I'm just asking versus Putting in something that we don't know
The
what we're
amount of
running
site
into.
work, utilities and everything, and the stormwater management that you have there that you wouldn't have in this building.
See, the difference in a new building and the present, if you got a new building, and I'd certainly put myself in that position again, when we were in Elkton and we got $55 million, it was like, we were putting this here, putting this here, putting this here, putting this here. The current building, which would be good for you, it's not so much you can put in there the way you want. You have to, do detour and do other things, which still is an effective use.
Yeah, and I think we have to look at it further than just a room for summer camp. I mean, classrooms for little things that you do, and, they're upstairs acting like they're on a basketball field or something, which is not fair to the upstairs, but that's not what we're looking at this giant room to be. It has to be more than that and developed into, is what I think
There's a lot
we're
of
looking
area,
at.
there's a lot of rooms in that building
Yeah.
that we could put, that would be very useful for us.
Well, it sounds like the consensus is to acquire the armory.
The acquisition, the Army would use all our match money up there, that's what I'm concerned about. The $500,000 that we had allocated for this building was match money for CDBG funds, because it's a 25-75 match. You would utilize all that money for the
Does-
acquisition of the Armory, and you get to borrow all the acquisition money, match money then.
Can we
Just
get,
use your fund balance, so.
Jean, I'm curious if she called. Do you know?
She did call.
She did call? And so she has the
Cindy's
answer.
known, she talked to Cindy.
Oh, yeah, Cindy.
And she told her why we were,
Yeah, they didn't feel that, first of all, we didn't have the funding in place, because they recommended the local government finance administration. And we didn't borrow money, because we didn't have access to a loan on it. And the other one was that they didn't think we were ready for it, shovel ready, because it's a design project rather than a construction project.
So what are you saying, Louis? I know what you're
I'm
saying, but I'm
saying
saying,
that
what
these
you-
projects are gonna be very costly,
Right.
and the board has to be able to accept the responsibility for those costs. And I'm saying, since we're using up our unassigned fund balance rapidly, it will necessitate another source of revenue to offset the cost of this stuff, no matter what you do.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I don't think we can let the armory get by us.
You know,
I don't
true.
think
Do you guys agree with
I
that?
agree.
yeah.
That's the answer, but
I know that's not our long-term picture, but I think we put our efforts to the armory. Let's get it, let's get the community rec center moving in that building and see, we'll use it as a pilot program or whatever we call it, until we acquire a way to start breaking ground on the other. Chief?
I think it would be beneficial also because you can use that as kind of a relief valve for some of the space constraints that we're beginning to experience under this roof. I'll just speak for the police department side. I know that we have some.
I mentioned that on your behalf before.
Yeah, we have some space constraints, so if there was some movement of the pieces here and Parks and Rec wound up over there, we may be able to take that back hallway at least.
I think if we could move.
So I think you gotta look beyond just the immediate effect that we felt for Parks and Rec, but there could be a longer term positive impact versus what would become some space constraints, at least on the police department side. I can't speak for the other side, but I don't think we're getting any smaller.
So Mary, looking ahead, would you still need to utilize the space you have, the space upstairs and the space over here? Or you could give up some, basically, as the chief is saying right there, to help alleviate some of the problems that he has?
You would be able to give all that building up, correct? And that could be our records, maybe storage.
I mean, in my own little plan that I've had, I foresee that as human resources. And with the police department just expanding into the back hallway here. And then utilizing one of those offices, the present human resource office for our detectives, or some of them, using some of the other rooms for additional record storage. I'd like to be able to keep records under one roof. My dream has always been to get our archives out from the Department of Public Works.
Is that where they are?
Wow. And you're saying that you can also utilize the property over on Bruce Street for summer activities? Right now.
I would like to. I would like to be able to put
Right
a
now.
playground or, I mean, just a field that's not underwater,
To take the kids to?
somewhere to take the kids.
Okay, that's a good start.
I mean, we're walking from here to Meadow Park when it's not bad weather. And when it's wet, we're kind of stuck inside all day with them.
Because you can't go to them.
We can't go to Meadow Park.
And I'll say this, our archives takes up a decent spot down there in a garage at DPW. If there were room across the street in the armory, we'd certainly be open to
You're not allowed
no.
Very good. Any other questions, comments? It is 1:45, this meeting's adjourned.
Work.
We'll work. Yes.
That's this way.
Next one, you got some issue?
to. Looks like you should turn that camera off. We haven't had it.